Hola, hola again. I turned into a cow. Anyways, this is part two of the first video. So we reviewed the progress of all seventh graders. So we have pre-test scores. Like I said before, those are the graphs, the black graphs, and then post test scores are the orange graphs. So I'm going to highlight the progress they made in all these different skills. So interpersonal listening skill, again, is the hardest. It takes about 4 to 6 years to get to intermediate levels. So at the beginning of the school year in October, I tested all the students, and this is where they were. So the pre-test, we could see that only 7 were in intermediate levels, and the rest were 5 and below novice. 5 because it includes the ones that have never taken Spanish, and 1, 3, and 2, and so on. So 7 were in intermediate level. This includes both the kids that had never taken Spanish before and the ones that have taken Spanish before. Now you could see that the black graph, now we see the post-test in the orange, and it's shifted to the right, which indicates that all students made progress. They all made progress, and we have in the second set, no one in N below or N1, a few in N2, 3, and so on. So what this tells us is that 18 students moved up to intermediate levels. So we had 7 at the beginning, and now we have 25 students that scored at intermediate levels. And again, this is the hardest skill. This is the computer version of the graphs, and it's awesome and beautiful, but I will be using this for if I do present at AAPPL. And we're still working on them, but for now, I'm going to use the paper graphs that we all have copies of. Now, writing, what does writing look like? So at the beginning of the year, the pretest scores show that most students were at novice levels and 12 were at intermediate levels. This is writing. Okay. This is again students that have never taken Spanish and students that took Spanish for a number of years. Now, the post-test, the graph shifted to the right again in the skill of writing, and 25 students moved to intermediate levels, and many more moved from novice low, to novice high. So the big people, the language acquisition ACTFL big people, they just want to know how many people move to intermediate levels because it's really, really hard. Teachers have done these tests, and out of 200, maybe only 6 move to intermediate. That's what I hear in workshops. It's really hard to move to intermediate levels. So, but I want to acknowledge those students that were in below N1 and N1 and actually made a progress and moved to higher levels of novice. So that's just something to consider. Now, instead of having, like at the beginning of the year, we had only 12 in intermediate levels, we end with 37 students moving to intermediate territory. Again, this is big for ACTFL people. In reality, in a classroom, only like 2 move to intermediate levels, and having 25 students move to intermediate levels it's pretty good. These kids are good kids. Now writing. Oh, this is what the writing looks like. And I have to acknowledge that a lot of the stories that I'm not good at, but I try, have to do with these scores because they're listening. As soon as you listen and you could say back a story to me, you're able naturally to write with ease. It's very natural. You have to listen to the language for hundreds of hours in order for you to write minimal, hundreds and hundreds more in order for you to write paragraphs. It's a byproduct. Now, listening, of course, I do a lot of listening with the storytelling. At the beginning of the year, only 7 kids were at intermediate levels, and most of them were novice mid, which is novice 3. You see the huge graph there. At the end of the school year, the graph shifts to the big graph, the big long N3 black one goes down, and there's more people moving to the right to intermediate levels. And now I like covering the graphs because it makes it very clear, very visual. They 34 reach intermediate levels. This was a wow, wow, wow for me. And 8 students instead. Before there were 8, now we have 42 students. And one of the, these are the activities that I did with the kids, the storytelling, the listening with the ed puzzles, the reading that we do with the magazines, the movie talk, describing a little short movie, the soap operas, and the big one that really, really was a hit was the chisme. Vamos a chismear. The kids were able to create little chisme. Chisme is gossip. It sounds bad in English, but in Spanish, that's how we connect when we do chisme, we have food. It's a cultural thing. So it worked in the classroom. It worked with middle schoolers. We created a lot of the chisme. When it was a little mean chisme, we stopped it. It had to be fun and healthy. Now reading. Reading is something that you could control. You could read at your pace and you could decode if you're a bright kid. Me. Forgot I was a cow. Um, um, you could decode words, and if you're a good reader in English, it transfers to being a good reader in Spanish. So 22 kids were in intermediate levels pre-test, and the graphs again moves to the right with the orange graphs there. And we have 22 kids moving into intermediate levels. So now we have 44 students in intermediate levels versus 22 at the beginning of the year. So that's double. So of course, you're going to have high numbers in reading when there's a lot of interaction in the classroom. The second part of my presentation is discussing the progress in more detailed manner, like who made this progress, what type of kid made this progress. We question like where did the first year students fall, the second year, third. And that's a lot of data and a lot of numbers. So we decided to focus on the 7 year of Spanish students versus the 0 year of Spanish students. How did they score pre and post, and how did the 0 year of Spanish students scored pre and post? And how did their scores compare to the national data? That's what we will be looking in part 2, and it's very interesting to see where these students fall and how we look nationally with other schools. And thank you for listening. I spent my whole weekend working on this. So now I have to make milk. Bye.